Okay, hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the difference between correlation and causation. Correlation is basically two factors and they're not connected together. Causation is basically cause and effect, and there isn't a cause and effect, so there is a direct link, there is a connection between them. And that's the key factor between the independent variable and dependent variable, like we said in the last video. So this is the completion of the last video, as I promised. And I have a nice link that we will see together for sure. It's a nice link from the crash course. It talks about the difference between correlation and causation. For right now, what's important is that I want to focus on the link, the different terms between the correlation, the different types of correlation. So there's a negative correlation and positive correlation. Okay, positive correlation is basically two factors, they go up or down. Negative correlation is that there's an inverse connection. Okay, so so up, down, down, up. Okay, so in that sense, it's an inverse connection. Okay, the basically the positive is that they both go up or they both go down, and that has to do with the mathematics and statistics in the sense of if they're inverse, that means the negative connection. If they are the same direction up and down, that means it's a positive connection, so a positive number in the end. Okay, so -2 times -2 is -2 times -2 is basically 4. Okay, so -2 times -2 is 4. You take out, what do you take out? The negative. Okay, -8 times -8 is 16, right? However, -8 times 8 is -16. Okay, so that's what's important. That's what's important here. Okay, so here this has to do with the math part, the statistics part. You can find it now. Yeah. So as I said, in the textbooks it changes. However, it's the same. It's the same thing where wherever it is in the sense of the meaning, the sense of the concepts and everything else. Okay, the math usually is the same. The math is usually the same. It's terminology or the different maybe theories, it may change, but for statistics, I believe it's the same, but didn't change much. Usually, if you go to learn statistics introduction at least, and then afterwards for social science, usually they're not, they're typical textbooks and traditional kind of studies. Okay. Actually, so the terminology is pretty basic here, and so it's not really sophisticated. I don't want to complicate things, but what's important here is that to have an idea of what's going on in the world of correlation and causation. Okay, and what's the difference between them? Because they are used in statistics that you will find with career books and textbooks. They are also used if you go to career libraries or you talk to career professionals who are interested to get you to know assessments or the accreditation of assessments or their score in validity and different things that have to do with the statistics of the test itself. So you have the test, is it for the average? Is the test valid for your population? Is the test valid for whatever, 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 whatever? There are different factors, population, region, purposes, whatever it is. Okay. So is it valid for maybe it needs to be renewed, the test? Sometimes you have in some tests they have, not all, but some tests they have a renewal date. Okay, they have it, or they have like a factors that has to be there. I don't know. So this is all the statistics part of that. Okay, so so you need to be aware of all of that. If just to make sure that, for example, if you talk to your counselor or if you talk to a person who is not necessarily your counselor, it may be institution of career, and there's a person who has to do with assessments, or there's a person who has to do with getting you a kind of orientation or an idea of what kind of test do you want to take. Okay, maybe you won't. Okay, I don't know. Maybe usually these tests are not stigma, by the way. They are made for you just to know yourself. So these tests are made not for in this context, except if, I don't know, if there is a kind of I don't know if there is such a thing where It's a formal test, but I do not believe there are career tests that are formal. This is really important. Even human resources, they are not formal. Maybe the company chooses to make it in a certain format that goes back to the company, I guess, or to the format of the test, but it's usually not formal. You can find it online, you can do it online. They're very, very helpful, fun. And they're 90% of that, if not 99. I don't know if there is, but like I said, the main purpose of career is not stigma at all, is for you to get to know yourself, and you need to have a comfortable environment, and you need to be very, very, and this is for the average. So this is not like it's not like a session, or it's not like a class with a teacher. Yeah, it's for you. It's like going to the library, getting a book. It's just for you to get to know yourself, and just to read, and to maybe go into textbooks, or talking to the career counselor, or talking to the person who's doing the test, or talking to whatever, whatever there are. Here we're talking about um, um, uh, language and culture. You can talk about the resume. You can talk about the culture you're in. You can talk about, um, what kind of university should I go to. This is all have to do with career. Okay. You can talk about your CV, cover letter. You can talk about being presentable. You can talk about, all of these. This is for the average. It's for anyone really. And you can be in a professor in a university, or you can be just graduating from high school, or just actually middle school, just getting an idea, or maybe you want to do an internship from middle school. This is all for career. It's not at all like a psychology or a school or whatever. No, it's just it's a tool that you would have if you have it in wherever you are, institution or whatever. And that's what's important. Okay. So this is important because the career is a very, very important part of our world today. And it does help a lot. It does, especially when you start from the beginning and you're familiar with all of these. Um, it's it's a kind of predictor for a better successful career than others, for sure. Especially if you come from international curriculums, or curriculums that depend on international world, especially what we call English world, or in North America, Canada, United States, or Australia, or United Kingdom, or in South America, for example. Lately, in the last 20 years, South America has been growing greatly, and obviously Europe, in many places in Europe that was not, growing. Obviously, it's highly in demand. Obviously, after the Corona, things changed, but it's still there in the sense of, international wise. It's a much it makes you much more professional. It's easier for you to get letter of recommendations. It's easier for you to get your resume done. You know yourself more. You will be part of this world. You're more independent. You know what's coming up. And obviously, it's a much better predictor for you uh, to have jobs or whatever. Okay, so in this case, you need to make sure that um, you are on the right track with these things, at least to be familiar with them. Now, some people prefer not to go to career, but it's like library. It's up to you, right? Now, not everyone likes to go to library. Okay, that's great, but if you do, just make sure that you know all of these, so that you won't feel like you're in school, or you're going to a counseling session, or it's not at all like that. That's what's important here. So having this in mind, that we talked a lot about before, please look at my other videos if you did not. I talked a lot about this and other important points, but today we're going to talk about these two concepts, causation and correlation. I talked about in the last video the important point of in the last video I talked about the important point of um, what's it called? The important point of causation, correlation, and to know the difference. Okay, because if you do not know the difference, then you what's it called? You will you'll have a kind of problem when you look at the statistics. Maybe you're looking up an assessment that you want to that you want to take. For example, okay, so maybe for example you need to take an assessment and you feel like it's not for your culture, or I don't know, you didn't like it, you can look it up and look at the statistics. Okay, that's an example. Maybe in a company, for example, maybe in a company you need a kind of what's it called a kind of you know uh, you need a kind of test or a kind of career research. Okay, and that obviously would help you a lot. Not only that, there are a lot of different things that you can do with correlation and causation, even if you're not in career, but for the career purposes it is important. And I like to provide this link for the career library. So I'm going to show the link right now, and I want you to focus on the terminology, get to know the terminology, the definitions, and to focus on the main ideas, so I can just talk about just the main examples and ideas from there, so that if you have any questions or comments, please what's it called please ask me, or contact me as soon as possible. Okay, so let me share with you the link. It's from Crash Course, and it talks about the main ideas. It's really important. Okay, let me share it with you first. Let me make sure it's Okay, so I hope you liked the video. I think it's a highly informational video. I was looking at the selection and it's very, very informative and interesting, and it's fun in the sense it's nice how they put the graphs and linked into the terminology, so you find the difference between positive and negative relationship on a graph, as well as you find the difference between the different types of correlation. So what's important here is the difference between correlation and causation. Okay, so causation basically is cause and effect. Obviously, there's not a lot of talk here about causation. It's more about the correlation on the graphs. The correlation, there's many research done on correlation because you don't have to have cause and effect. Like we said in the last video, please look at it if you didn't. In the last video, basically, doing an experiment needs a lot of ethics, morals, tools, work, permission, and it's very, very hectic usually because it's not easy usually to manipulate the independent variables. So for example, you can do an experiment for the company we said about unemployment, and the unemployment is obviously dependent, and the independent variable would be the economic downfall. So that's kind of hard also. Maybe they can be creative in it, but would it be a kind of good example of cause and effect? That's also another question. That's the next step. So the first step is cause and effect. Okay, does it represent cause and effect? Okay, that's the first one. In the sense of the first one is basically does it represent in the sense of we have an independent variable, we manipulate it to make the dependent variable, we look at the error, right? Great, we have the end, the result. Now, what the result is with everything we did, it may not represent the population we want, and it may not present the real world, obviously, because it's very hard. Okay, you need a big population, and that's also hectic and hard to get. So that's another kind of scientific and bias and other issues that you may find in error in science, right? And statistics and everything else in the research world, especially with social science and psychology. So, or human resources, or whatever you may call it. Okay, so in that sense, you need to make sure that this is all uh, this is all this is all there, and you have all this in mind when you want to experiment or when you think about cause and effect. So it's pretty hard in the science world, in the mathematics or statistics world and research world to have cause and effect, basically. That's why correlation is highly used in the research world. It's so much easier, and you get a link. Now, the math she talked about, the graphs and everything else gives you a good idea. Okay? Basically, you need to look at the different graphs according to the terminology that's used. So what is positive correlation? You look at the graphs and how she explained it was negative correlation. How does it relate to the research itself? Okay? The second part is basically you need to look at the importance of the slope and everything else she talked about on the graph linked to the correlation. The last part is she talked about sporadic correlation, which means that they don't have a connection. There are many actually, because there can be now, usually today we have between economic downfall and unemployment, there is, we know, right? There's a lot of research done before about it. It's common sense. However, not necessarily by the way the research you would do, or you would find, not always it would show it, but it's no. Okay, there is a connection. Okay, let's put it that way. But let's just say that the correlation between let's say the correlation between I don't know students in a certain school, um, uh, maybe attending after school activities and their grade level. Okay, now that's debatable and controversial, right? So the after school activities, does it affect the student to have high grade levels or low grade levels? Okay, so how does it affect it? Okay, so when there's an increase in school activity, basically for the student, does their grade increase or does their grade decrease? Okay, in that sense, does that make sense? Okay, so let's put it that way. So here it may be sporadic. I don't know. Okay, so it may be that obviously there's a lot of research done, but it may be that there's no connection. So you find that there's no kind of link. So it's not like the more activities they do, the higher the grade, or the more activities they do, the less the grade, or the more activities they do, the less the grade, and opposite wise. Okay, there's no connection, nothing. Okay, now the sporadic correlation, it always exists actually. However, and sometimes it may be from mistake in the research, or sometimes it may be from other factors, but there is a sporadic correlation. And that's usually why in the research they put error. Okay, why is this important for you to know? Because usually if there is a sporadic correlation, that means that there is no connection. Okay, and usually they put it in assessments or in different tools that they use in career for things that usually there is no correlation between them. And they show it in a graph or in research done in such a way, okay, which is sporadic correlation. There are different terms used for such that there's no correlation, rather than sporadic, okay, or no connection, or no link, or there is no I think it was like no, anyways, basically there is no correlation between these two factors, okay, or different factors, okay. So this is what's important here, because because what's important is that the correlation between two, it might not necessarily have a correlation, so no correlation, okay. And when there's such finish, you have to move on, except if you believe that there are different factors, like for example, maybe you find no correlation, and you find in the school example, you find in the school example, for example, you have a you have, for example, a I don't know, you have, for example, small population, okay. Yeah, it can obviously do a sporadic correlation because there's a small population. You know for sure from your experience in the subject, or from your research as a researcher or a scientist, social scientist, that you need a bigger population or whatever. Okay, maybe you didn't get the correct information. Maybe the information was provided wrong by the people or the students. It may happen, right? Okay, for whatever reason. Maybe you have to review. Maybe it's from you guys, in the sense that maybe some scores were wrong. Okay, so you have to go back and review. Now it doesn't mean that the sporadic correlation is wrong. It's just the result. This is also an important point. So I remember when I was doing research before, when I was in university, and for different purposes, they always was no, it's the result. You need to put in consideration the different factors, but it's the result in the end. Okay. Now, sometimes it does make a difference, sometimes no. Okay, so this is important because that's part of research and that's part of the science life. However, you need to keep in mind that there's no relation, and that's the result itself. And you'll find a lot of research has that result. So it's a sporadic, there's no relation, and there's nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, it's highly professional, and that's the result of the research. Especially that if it comes after you look at the different factors or you did the research, that's great. Okay, that's the result. That is the result, and that's the final of the research. That's what's important point here. And they're always used in different research strategies, or different research what's it called, different research strategies, or different research basically different research activities, okay, or different research findings, okay. These are all important, like I said, for career in the career library, because you'll always use them when you look at you'll always use them when you look at the information or research or textbooks or studies or assessments or whatever tools you want to look at in career. You'll find that a lot of research is done, and when they talk about correlation or causation, you'll know the difference, and you know how they're used, especially that right now correlation is different than causation. Correlation is not cause and effect. Correlation is only a link between two variables or two factors. However, causation is a cause and effect relationship, which means that There is a relationship with cause and effect. Independent variable is manipulating an experiment to a dependent variable, and you have different results. The result shows a cause and effect result. That's what's important. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, please ask me. Please share with others. Please subscribe and share with others to subscribe if they're interested viewers in the subject or other subject or just general in the channel. Thank you so much. Bye.